All right, we have about 44 people attending the webinar in addition to our panelists here today, so welcome. This is the first of 2 webinars this week that we're doing for the campus about Illinois State's next LMS. And so the first thing I probably need to do, depending on who you are and how familiar you are with some of the jargon that we use about the technology of teaching and learning, LMS stands for Learning Management System, and that's what ReggieNet is currently on our campus. We're in the process of replacing ReggieNet, which is based on this product called Sakai. So you're going to hear us talk about Sakai today. And we are today talking about one of the potential replacements, which is from a company called Instructional, and it is called Canvas. So joining us today, we have a couple of people. I'm going to ask people to introduce themselves. First, let me start with my colleague, Charles Bristow from the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology. Charles, why don't you introduce yourself to the folks?
You kind of just did, Jim.
Okay.
But
Well,
my role here is I'm kind of the team lead at CTLT for our functional support for instructors for our LMS. So I was kind of passing through the participant list, saw a lot of familiar names that I've been in contact with in the past. So welcome. We hope we can answer some questions you might have about where we're going next.
Thank you, Charles. Let me also introduce Jen Bethman. Hi, Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen Bethman. I'm the Web Accessibility Coordinator. I am housed out of Technology Solutions, predominantly the web team. And I go through our digital technology and I review for accessibility and working with assistive technologies like screen readers and other types of digital experiences to make sure there isn't any barriers to individuals, especially those with disabilities.
And we have 2 guests today from Instructional, folks associated with Canvas. Let's start with you, Carolyn.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation to be here. We're really excited to be here showing you, helping you, learn more about Canvas. And I'm going to be hanging out in the chat today in the Q&A, helping you all out with your questions. I am the solutions engineer for Instructional. And essentially what that means is I help you think through the product in terms of your needs and, if the product would fit your needs. So a lot of the more technical questions, but I also have a background in instructional design and faculty training. I was in higher ed for about 15 years before joining Instructional, and also had the opportunity to run my own LMS review. So I've been exactly where you are. And I'm just really excited to be here, sharing my experiences with you, and then also just helping you learn more about the platform.
Great, thank you. And GK.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, we are happy to be here. So thank you for having us. My name is GK Risser. I am what we call a regional director of higher education here at Canvas. I oversee all the activity in higher ed across 9 of the central United States. And I work side by side with Carolyn, who's actually, I think, our greatest resource on this team helping you today. I do have a background in pedagogy and curriculum design. I used to work for Macmillan Higher Education, and someone showed me Canvas and I immediately jumped the fence and came over here.
Great, thank you. So I guess I didn't actually introduce myself. My name is Jim G, and I am the assistant director for communication at the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology. So a lot of you on the faculty side have gotten emails from me in the past about different things. I also do faculty support. I also teach part-time in the School of Communication, and I've been using ReggieNet now as an instructor, since ReggieNet came into being, so about a decade now, on and off. So welcome again to everyone. We're up to about 61 participants in the audience. Some of you may be kind of wondering what's going on with the Zoom ecosystem that we're in today. And that's because we're using a version of Zoom that's specifically for webinars for a couple of reasons. One, we're not sure how many people are going to show up to this. And the other reason is we want this to be question driven. And so right now the traditional chat is turned off for the audience, and we may turn that on at some point. I will say to my fellow panelists, you should be able to put links to things in there if you need to. And we can test that here in a moment if we'd like. But we would actually like our audience members to communicate through a different button in Zoom. It's called Q&A. And if you all click that, you will see, Oh, and you know what else I need to do? I just realized I need to turn on the live transcription feature. I'm going to turn enable auto transcription. There we go. So there are two features going on now. So one of them is you should be able to turn on or off using the closed caption button or the live transcription button and see what people are saying converted over to text. If you don't need that, you can turn that off. You can control that on your screen. But like I was saying, if you go to the, is that not going? Try that again. Enable live transcript. Are you guys seeing this as I talk?
It
No?
was there and then it went away.
Let us try that. Sorry, folks. I'm going to click it one more time and see if that does it. If not, we may not have that function today, unfortunately. Anyway, I apologize for that. Let's get to the Q&A and I will work on this then as Charles is talking. The Q&A button, if you click on that, this is a way for you to ask questions. Everyone can see the questions that you're asking, and then that will allow a member of our panel to respond to the question either in text or will mark it as, answered, live on the air, as it were. So this way we'll have a more organized sort of log of the questions that are going on, which I think will be helpful. And it will help us as members of the next LMS team know what we need to go investigate. We may not have the perfect solution right now for you, or the perfect answer for you. The other thing, I believe I have it set up so that you can upvote questions. So if you see a question that you're interested in and you want to know about it too, go ahead and give that question a thumbs up as well. So I would invite you, I'm going to turn it over to Charles to go ahead and give us a brief little overview of things here in just a moment. I do very quickly want to talk about the next LMS project. And so, actually, no, you know what, Charles, let's just go ahead and dive into the comparisons and we'll talk timeline here once you're done. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Charles, and let you take over, okay? But as Charles is talking, if you have questions, go ahead and hit that Q&A button and start asking questions in that chat.
Okay. Jim, just to point out, I've got a little message up at the top now that says live transcription has been enabled, but I'm not actually seeing the transcription.
It's
So,
under the more, and then once you stop, Jim G, stop sharing, the more available, and then the transcript shows up on the where like the participants.
Yeah, it looks like
there
it's
it is.
working now. It looks like it's working now. So Charles, why don't you go ahead and anyway, thank you everyone for your patience. Charles, why don't you go ahead and when you're ready, we can start talking a little bit about the differences that we've discovered between Canvas and ReggieNet.
All right. So as Jim said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just to give you a look at the folks at Instructure have given us an instance for us to play around in. And so hopefully everybody can see that. Yes, no? Okay. Jim gave me a thumbs up, so I guess we're good to go. So this is the main login screen. Or actually, let me get, yep, yeah, I am. So comes up to this dashboard. It shows me my courses as these little tiles. Over on the right-hand side, I see a list of things, either things to do as an instructor. And also I see things that I'll see things coming up that I need to do if I'm a student. And my view might be a little bit different from what you would see as a typical instructor, because I'm also in here as an administrator. So I've got probably some extra buttons over on the left-hand side here that you wouldn't necessarily typically see. But just to be aware of that. There's an overall calendar that shows things for various classes. And these are actually they're color coded by these different colors, and you can choose which colors you want to use for each class or course. So you can easily identify things that are coming up. Here we can see a quiz that's closed. We can see a quiz due date down here. A couple other things that are due tomorrow. all associated with the course that I have as labeled as blue at the moment. I can also put personal calendar things on here. That's what this, so I have my name is a separate color, so I can add something to the calendar as just for my own personal use that might not be associated with a particular course. I have an overall inbox over on the left, and I haven't actually really sent any messages, but if I want to send a message, I can choose from a particular course and choose who to send it to in that course. So actually I'm seeing, oh, I didn't actually manage to select a particular course. So if I pick this one, I can choose, and I've only got a couple people in here at the moment, but I can send a message right from here without even necessarily getting into a course.
So Charles, let me jump in quickly. As we go along, I think it's probably going to be important that we highlight how this is different from the way it works in ReggieNet. So if I understand, in ReggieNet, you have to go into the actual course site in order to use the mail tool to email.
That's correct. Yes.
Students. So this means you don't have to go into each course site and email each. A lot less clicking, I guess, is what I'm getting to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a shorter route to get into the messages if you wish to do that. Let's go ahead and take a look at a course. Again, I can either do that from the dashboard, or I can click the courses button over on the left, and I'm just going to go ahead and get into my sandbox. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can see here. I now have a tool menu for this course. On the left-hand side, I have a series of kind of quick options, so I can quickly get to a new announcement if I want to do that. I can import some content. I can choose whether this course is published or not. Again, I have my kind of to-do and coming up list down below here. Let's see. Choose homepage allows me to pick exactly what the students will see when they first get into the course. And I have a number of options here. I can go to the course activity stream, which basically shows kind of stuff that's going on in the course. I can pick something in the pages tool. I can pick a particular page to be my home page for the course. I can jump right to the course modules and have those show up as the main entrance point. I can also do an assignments list or the syllabus. I went ahead and chose a front page as my opening, and I didn't make the page very interesting, unfortunately. But I've just selected a particular page from the pages tool on the left-hand side to be my home page. Most of the tools you'll see are have an analog from ReggieNet. Obviously, the syllabus tool has an analog. Announcements are similar. I'm going to skip over grades for the moment. Modules are kind of the equivalent to the lessons pages, but they are different. So that's good. That actually is going to be one of the bigger changes if we move to Sakai, is that lessons pages will be dealt with in a couple different ways, but the modules allow you to list a series of items. You can add various items to the module that the students can then work through. And one of those options are what are called pages. So in this case, the first thing I have in this module is a page, and I just shamelessly cut and pasted from our next LMS web page because I was being lazy. If you want to see the material here, go to nextlms.illinoisstate.edu and you can see this information. But since I'm in the module, I can then just cycle to the next item, which happens to be a quiz that is expired. So I can just keep working through this module. This is a link to a Word document, so on. And actually there is a previewer in here, so I can actually see this document without having to open it up in Word.
So Charles, let me jump in quickly and ask you. So one of the differences, am I picking up that whereas in ReggieNet, a lessons page, you can cram a lot of stuff on it. This seems to work more as a module seems to work more as a sequence of things where you're going from one
Right,
page to
yes.
the next. Okay.
Yeah, and you could include those things on a lessons page, like links to a test or links to a discussion on a lessons page. Here, the kind of the content page is separated to some extent, if you want to use that word. I mean, they're still right next to each other. They're not really separated, but they're kind of separated out as separate items in that module. So if we go back to the module
Thank you.
again. So that's a link to a quiz. That's a link to a document. That's a link to a discussion. So I have all these various options that I can add to this module. So here's all the things that I can choose from, and I can choose external tools, an external URL. I can put in text headers to kind of divide things up. I can choose some indentation if I want to organize things a little bit more cleanly than I have here. And actually, if we wanted to look at something that was built out a little bit more, if we go back and look at courses, that's not what I wanted to say. I need to go to admin. Sorry, I know I was going to end up jumping around. Where's the history one? So this is an example course that Canvas has provided us to look at. So if we look at a module here, again, here's a module on the revolution. And so here's all the various things that you can do for that particular module. So there's a couple of questions about importing here. I'm going to go ahead and kind of jump into that a little bit. We will be working on a migration process to bring all of, well, I won't say all of our current courses from ReggieNet into Canvas. We will make a recommendation about kind of how many years worth of courses that we want to migrate. And there will be a migration process that will happen probably next spring, where kind of all the courses will be migrated over in bulk. But before that happens, we're going to be doing some pilot testing with migration and figuring out what the best method will be to move our content into the new system. So we're going to be doing some test migrations. We'll look at the results of those and then hopefully be able to do some tweaking to that that migration process and run it through a couple of iterations to try and get as clean an import as we possibly can. So
and I can
hopefully
talk
that-
a little bit more about the timeline once you're
right.
done with kind of this initial presentation, Charles. So we
Yeah.
can kind of do that. Can you show us the grades?
Sure.
Do you feel
So-
comfortable doing that?
Yeah, and actually this is another, well, there are kind of two other places that Canvas, I'd say, is kind of significantly different from ReggieNet. And that's kind of the grade book and the way assignments are kind of set up. So actually, before I get to the grades, I'm actually going to talk about assignments a little bit, because there's an assignments button over here, but assignments in Canvas are a little bit different than what we think of as assignments in ReggieNet. Assignments in ReggieNet are basically homework. You know, it's something that the students will submit something for. Assignments in Canvas is really more of an overall term that includes any kind of student activity. It might be homework type things. It might be quizzes or tests. It might be discussions. And you can see I have set up a number of assignment groups here. So I have one called, there's always one called assignments. I have one called discussions. How the heck did that get in here? Oh, I'm still in US history. Silly me. Well, that's all right. So these are homeworks. These are discussions. These are quizzes. This is a participation. Again, some more, these are extra credit things. So these are all, each of these is a group. And within those groups, you can add different kinds of assignments. So it might be a typical assignment. And this should look kind of familiar, where you can choose what kind of submission the students are going to do, how many attempts they have, is it group, is it peer reviewed, all those kinds of the date kinds of things. I'm not going to actually add anything here. But as I add things, I have options of what type of assignment is this going to be? Is it a homework assignment? Is it discussion, quiz, external, something that's not even graded? That's kind of where things are sort of all collected together. And it's also here where we can do things like set up, and I need to, if I want to categorize, this kind of is equivalent to categories in our current grade book. And if I want to do weightings, I can do that. But again, I do this from the assignments tool rather than doing it directly in the grade book. If we click on grades, this is really just where you're going to go in to look at student grades. You can enter grades directly here. You can also enter grades directly from the tools. So again, I don't want to mess around in this one. I want to go back to my course. We'll look at the grades here because I have actually entered some grades here. I just put Jim in the course and he just got in this morning. So he hasn't actually done anything yet. So don't hold that against him. But you can see there's a test student that's automatically added to a course. And that's something I didn't point out when I'm in a course, actually, except for in this thing. There is a student view, so I can go in and become that test student. And I can do things like I can go in and take a quiz. And that will actually show up in the quiz results when I go in and look at those. So I can act as a student in this course, test things out, and make sure things are working properly. And then I need to leave student view. And we'll go back to grades again. Oh, shoot. Turn. So you can see my test student actually does have some grades in here for various things. I can see my category percentages over on the right-hand side. But again, I don't do a whole lot here in the way of kind of setting up the grade book. That's all done from the assignments, or even there are a couple things that you can do in the overall course settings, like setting up the grade scheme, that are handled elsewhere outside of this grades tool. So that's something that's a little bit different from the way ReggieNet works, where everything that is really kind of handled directly through the grade book and the settings there.
Charles, that sounds great. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and we have a lot of great questions coming in. So really quickly, I'm going to take control of the screen if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
And well, I got to find it here first. Here we go. I'm going to take control of the screen, and really quickly, I want to just, building upon what you mentioned in terms of migration, I want to talk a little bit more and throw out a couple of resources for people. So as I may have mentioned, or as I know Charles mentioned, we have our website, which is nextlms.illinoisstate.edu. And that is, hopefully you've been there before, but that is where we're going to post not only the video for this, but we do have a couple of demonstration videos that our good friends at Canvas have provided us, including some about with the student experience, which I think touch on the mobile app. You know, that's something that has been a criticism of ReggieNet for a long time from the students when we survey them. So we will be making an announcement. We'll send an email out to faculty and staff when that is done. But for everyone, if you keep an eye out on this website, you'll see those things updated. I did want to talk about the timeline. And of course, this holds true both for Canvas and for Brightspace D2L, which we'll be doing the same thing talking about on Thursday. The advisory committees are going to make their recommendations to the administration next month. And next month starts, you know, in just a couple of days. I would imagine it's going to be more towards the end of May, just because, you know, May is a busy time for other reasons on a college campus, not just selecting a new learning management system. And we'll proceed then the pilot testing with a group of faculty and students doing it for real in the fall of 2022. But if you don't want to be part of that pilot, and for those students who may be in our audience, if you are or watching the recording of this, I think it's highly likely that you will be still using ReggieNet for most, if not all, of your classes for the 2022-2023 academic year. As Charles mentioned, in spring 2023, we will be continuing pilot testing, and I think the migration will begin in earnest. There are some decisions that have to be made between now and then, and that's why, you know, choosing the LMS is just the first step. It's coming up with that recommendation for the transition plan. But if all things line up, and we're pretty confident that they will, whichever LMS we pick, we anticipate the campus will adopt that fully in the fall of 2023. This is a faster timeline, as I'm sure Charles especially can attest, of when ReggieNet was adopted over the old WebCT/Blackboard product that we had 12 years ago or whatever. But it's a different era, and we have many more people using ReggieNet now than used WebCT before, and so the learning curve I don't think is going to be as steep. So I just kind of wanted to go over that very quickly. And we do have a lot of great questions in chat. I see several of them have been answered. So if you are wondering about integration with Outlook calendars, we had a couple of those already answered. How email works, we've gotten some information on that as well. I see, Jen, it looks like you're typing an answer in response to Hulda's question about this. This also begs question of mobile accessibility for students. Did you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, I kind of stopped typing, was hoping I could get a minute to have a conversation about that real quick, or a chat. When it comes to, at least from my experience, I was able to take both the instructor view and the student view through its accessibility paces, both in desktop and mobile. There is a student app, and then there's the instructor app. And I was able to get through typical tasks using VoiceOver. So the typical thing that I work with is VoiceOver on an iPhone. And so the accessibility of that one is I was able to get through with swipe gestures. I do know if there is, or for us, as we talk about not having that option in ReggieNet right now, that is a step up where people are able to get the push notifications. That is accessible via however push notifications are on an individual phone. So that is part of the phone and not and that information, but able to read content. And I do know that most of the instructor stuff still, or at least in my opinion, the instructor stuff was easier to put in on the desktop than on the mobile. And I'm getting a nod from Carolyn. So as an instructor, it might be behoove us to do things in the desktop, and then you can go and check stuff or drop a message in mobile. But creating the course content would probably be better in desktop. But both of them, I was able to get through and complete those tests through accessibility testing. I did also want to mention people were asking questions about math, and that was also something that was a big concern because that is a big thing in ReggieNet, that it's very hard to provide math equations, whether it's and accessible math equations at that point. I did want to highlight that the editor tool, which is consistent across Canvas, which is very pleasing, that's a consistent experience across, does have an equations editor where you're able to do math equations. And I will tell you, math is not my strongest of suit, but I threw in a couple of known math equations and listened to them with a screen reader, and they sounded correct to me. So if anyone with a math is able to be like, no, that didn't sound right, let me know. But you are able to add in, I did basic algebra and all that kind of stuff. So I do know that higher like physics and chemistry are probably going to have more complicated. There were options for that within the text editor tool. And then the last thing I do want to touch base on with this, that especially when it comes to the editor tool and accessibility, is the accessibility checker that is available within the Canvas product. And one of the nice things about that editor tool is it gives you a notification. There's a visible, and it is read by assistive technologies when there is a perceived issue. It could be a missing alt text, it could be some color contrast issues. Those you're able to get a indication right there on the tool editor. And unlike Sakai, you have to go searching for your accessibility checker. This one is right there in the bottom right corner of all the editor tools.
Great, Jen. Thank you. A couple things I'd like to point out here quickly. Everyone's asking some great questions, so we appreciate that. I do want to say that some of the scenarios you're giving us are incredibly specific, and we may not be able to answer them to the extent that you'd like to. It's great that you're asking the questions, because that's information that we're going to take and we're going to go research. So Carolyn, I did see that, for example, David Marks had asked a question, and then he had a follow-up question about having variable numbers in questions. In other words, you put in an equation, but you want the LMS to generate different variables so that each student gets a different problem to work out. So I don't know if you want to address that on camera, or if you'd rather just try to address that follow up, or if we don't know yet, that's fine too.
Well, there is a calculated question type that's similar to what we have in ReggieNet. So you can generate variables and have the students work out some kind of equation problem, but they don't start with the same initial numbers. I think a number of people had asked about calculated questions. There was also a question about question pools. We should be able to copy those over without too much issue, at least that is our hope. There was also a question about importing from Word. And that is not something I was actually playing around with that a little bit last night, Kevin, as it happens. And I did not find as simple a way to convert a Word document with a series of multiple choice questions directly into a quiz in Canvas.
Well, let's let our colleagues from Instructure jump in on that.
If they have a better answer for that, I'd be happy to hear it.
Yeah, so typically what we do is use, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name of it, but we would use a third-party tool to import that. I can't believe I'm blanking on it. So I'm going to find the guide and put it in the chat, or probably along with this answer. It's Respondus. Yes, thank you. You guys are asking so many amazing questions, and my brain is just like, firing on. It's just going everywhere. So yeah, let me find the info for Respondus, and I'm going to put it in there. But that is typically what people use to import the Word doc and get them formatted.
Great, thank you.
Oh, and then just to confirm, for the algorithm question, yeah, I'm also going to put the guide in there for that question type, for our quizzes.
Thank you. And we'll be saving the chat, so we will try to aggregate some of this stuff on the next LMS website over the next week or so as well. So again, when you're pasting stuff in chat, if you could just make sure for the panelists, make sure you're selecting everyone, not just sending it to the hosts and panelists. That might be something you're not used to from the vanilla version of Zoom. So again, great questions so far. We have about 20 minutes left or so, so let's kind of press on a little bit. And Charles, I'm going to rely on you to go through the open questions. And if we've just answered some of the ones related to math live, if you could just click answer live and then click done, that would help us. Is there a dark mode in Canvas? I haven't actually figured that out. I haven't actually looked for that yet. So GK or Carolyn? Yeah, I know you're doing many things at once. Yeah,
all over the place here.
Yeah.
Dark mode is a commonly requested feature in Canvas. So it is something that we're having conversations within our community. If you go to www.community.canvaslms.com, up in the top, you will see feature ideas. That is live. We have people who actually monitor that daily and participate in those conversations. We do reserve a large percentage of our development every year for suggestions, but when we prioritize a suggestion, we still have to fit it into the ecosystem of Canvas. So it takes us a little bit of time to work through them sometimes. But dark mode is on the radar. It's currently not out there. What we suggest is checking your browser settings and seeing if there's something somewhat compatible to that.
We do in the user settings have, you can easily toggle on high contrast, at least in the meantime.
Okay, great, thank you. There are a couple of questions I'm seeing related to video that I'd like to go ahead and address here in a moment. But first, with some of these specific questions, I think it's important just to say, with some of these very specific questions, we don't want to sugarcoat it for anyone. There's going to be work for faculty to do. There's going to be a learning curve for both faculty and students to do. There's no way to change systems as integral to our teaching and our students' learning on campus without having a little bit of heavy lifting to do. I have been gratified over the last year that we've been actually talking about this project, that everyone from the administration to the technical support people to my colleagues in CTLT are very, very cognizant of the fact that we have to make the burden as least burdensome as possible on faculty. So while we don't have direct answers, Susan had a question that she had sent Charles and me at different times, and I see it's in the chat as well. Susan Sprecher, about she has a very, very robust, exciting sounding online course, asynchronous course that takes full advantage of all of the powers that ReggieNet has, more than most instructors probably do. How are we going to translate that over? We don't know yet. Because, but I can guarantee you that's going to be one of those that is not just going to be automatically cooked into a new format. Someone's going to have to go in and tweak. So I want to assure everyone that that's been top of mind from the very beginning. And there will be a support apparatus that's put in place at Illinois State through CTLT or whatever our new name is going to be here in a couple of weeks. We'll be revealing that. And that will allow you to go through and that will allow us to help you put this stuff together. That's the main reason why there is going to be a year between piloting it in the fall of 2022 and adopting it in the fall of 2023. It's mainly to make sure that we're taking care of everyone and everyone has time to do it. If you think about it, by saying spring 2023 migration, we really need to get the migration for the most part solved before the summer, because summer is when you as instructors are going to be building out your courses for fall. For those of you teaching summer courses, that will be sort of thing. GK, go ahead and jump in quickly.
Yeah, could I speak to that, Jim? Because that was on my mind as I was reading. A lot of these questions are extremely nuanced and speak to the ecosystem at ISU, not just Canvas itself, right? And we appreciate all of that. And I'm glad Jim said what he did. There is a process of change involved. And I'll speak to, this is my role here from Canvas. Carolyn can teach you how to use Canvas in and out, all the pro tips and tricks, etc. My role is to make the migration easy for you. So a little bit of history and a little bit about what you're experiencing with ReggieNet. ReggieNet is built on Sakai. It seems everybody understands that. Sakai is an open source platform. It was created by a number of universities, Indiana, Michigan, Stanford, maybe almost 20 years ago now. Those founding universities have since left Sakai and moved to Canvas. And that started a whole funnel of schools leaving Sakai and moving to Canvas. The reason they do is because Canvas has this blend of a largely open source platform. It's flexible. It has open ends so that the school can do a lot of things to it. And yet it's also a very curated development experience to provide everybody with the same Canvas experience. That also makes the support experience the same, so that our teams know how to help you. So all that said, Canvas has been around for 12 years now. Canvas has become the most used learning management system in US higher ed because it's very easy to move to, very easy to learn, and it makes the teaching and learning experience better. The mobile apps are incredible. The students love them. So again, so I've been here 8 years. I've helped about 24 Sakai schools move to Canvas. And in terms of content, this is our highest priority for you. We want your content to be better in Canvas than it was. Like Jim said, it will be different. The experience will be somewhat different, but I believe the experience will be better for you. And the path has long been paved to move your content for you. So ISU is very concerned about that. And we've been working with them to show them the options that they have for that kind of process. But like Jim says, we just want you to know that we are aware of these concerns and they are a high priority in the project that we're all working on together. I don't know if anybody has questions regarding what I said, let me know, but I wanted to share that information.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for chiming in with that. I did want to address a couple of the video questions that we had in there very briefly. I think Catherine had mentioned that one of ReggieNet's strengths is that it does support really large video lectures that we record from Zoom as MP4s. That's actually not entirely accurate. I think that there's this file size limit of about 250 megabytes per video, but we have come up with a system using Microsoft Stream, and a couple of other folks asked about that as well. And so, having said that, Microsoft Stream is still the video platform that we will be using for the foreseeable future. It itself will be getting an upgrade within probably the next year. We're waiting to hear more details from Microsoft on that. You know, the one constant is change, right? But that also means that if you are currently using Microsoft Stream, or if you adopt using Microsoft Stream for your videos in the next year, they'll still be available through Microsoft Stream. They'll just plug into Canvas instead of ReggieNet when it comes time to use it. But the grouping and all of that authentication will still be handled. Charles, am I missing anything else as far as videos go?
No, that pretty well covers it. Somebody asked if there was integration between Canvas and Office 365. There is. I'm not sure if it allows. David is asking if you can comment directly on submitted documents, for instance. And I think somebody else asked us kind of a similar question.
So what we're really talking about is an integration with OneDrive, I think. So for either GK or Caroline, Carolyn, do you want to?
There's a OneDrive integration too, as far as I know.
Yeah, so it sounds like that integration is possible. I would dare say, so from what we at ISU have learned about Sakai, one of the reasons why we're moving on from Sakai, quite frankly, is the fact that Sakai doesn't get a lot of love from third-party vendors, meaning textbook publishers and also big companies like Microsoft. I was in a call not too long ago with some folks, and I said, how about a plugin for Sakai for Teams? And they said, what's a Sakai? So okay, so that's not happening. So there are plugins for various Office 365 tools for Canvas that don't exist for Sakai, Teams being first and foremost among them. I also suspect some of the ones that do exist on both platforms work better on programs like Canvas because they have such a market share and therefore command the attention for that. Does
Jim,
anyone
can I
else
add-
see a question? Oh yeah, go ahead.
Can I add one more thing about the integration? One of the other features within Canvas that is not within Sakai is the connection to Microsoft's Immersive Reader. So if anyone's not familiar with that, that's a way of having content in a text-to-speech format. And you can also highlight and do a lot of information that is consistent with what products we already use within Office 365. So it is another consistent experience that is a integration that is not currently part of Sakai.
Thank you. By the way, breaking news update. Our good friend Craig Jackson from Technology Solutions forwarded me an email from Zoom saying that they're investigating trouble starting live transcription service. So I don't feel so bad for those of you who go back to the beginning of the webinar. Anyway, does anyone else amongst our panel, do you see other questions that you wanna jump in and maybe might be easier to answer live as opposed to typing an answer in?
I'm going to be honest, I'm really behind. So
Okay.
many of these we're going to have to get back to you with
Sure.
more detailed questions, and some of these might even be maybe a follow-up session or even just maybe a quick video walkthrough or something. So we're trying our best. Thank you for your patience. I'm going to scan through here and see. Gosh, a lot of questions about calculated questions. Yes, I am getting back to that. Haven't gotten there yet.
Well, while you're looking at that, there is one
Yeah.
question I want to tackle. And Charles, I may ask you to chime in on this. From Jarrett Williams, will the university always be on the latest release / full feature set that Canvas offers, or will any features be, quote, turned off or limited, i.e. ISU to remain a version or two behind the most recent release and not choose to subscribe to certain features, et cetera? So that's actually, I think, addresses a couple different things. GK or Carolyn, would you feel comfortable just very briefly give us the 30-second elevator speech, talk about how frequently Canvas is updated? Because I think it's going to be a different experience for users than here at ISU, because we only do major updates to ReggieNet once a year.
I can do that, Carolyn. Yeah, so Canvas is a live website. Canvas has a 3-week production cycle. Every 3 weeks, features we've been working on that are ready to be put out are put out in a beta environment, an environment that the university can look at. And that helps us work on bug fixes before we put things out, or any changes. That allows us to have almost a month of feedback from our users. It also allows them to look at the functions, and if they're significant, to evaluate them. For example, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, we actually changed completely the way our dashboard looked. I didn't want to make that change. I had just learned Canvas, and it used to be more of like a social media feed, and now it's the tile-oriented to-do list dashboard. When that came out, I put it off. The day I decided to tackle it, I realized within a half hour it worked much better, and I liked it a lot better. But when a university has a change that's big like that, they have toggle switches on the back end, and they can wait until they have trained everyone and feel comfortable about making a change inside. So you'll never experience a total new version of Canvas. Instead, it will be incremental. Most of it you won't even notice. A lot of that 3-week cycle is bug fixes or little fixes, things like that. But when a big one does come out, we do put that toggle switch, and that's up to the university to decide when and how they want to deploy that across the campus. Does that answer that question?
I think it does. I think it's an important part of a larger answer as well, because I want to talk very briefly, and Charles, you can help me with this, talk about the templates and how templates are used in Canvas. So right now, when we talk about certain features being shown or hidden, There are certain things that Sakai can do that we have turned off by default, and sometimes you got to go hunt to find them. And we don't do that for a lot of stuff, but I know that is done for different reasons. Sometimes the tools just aren't, we don't think they're ready for prime time, but if someone wants to play with them, that sort of thing. And of course, we don't want to have too much clutter by default that you then have to go in and kill off every semester. Templates work differently in this product than it does in Sakai, in that right now we have just kind of one standard shell for everyone who has a ReggieNet course site. And with Canvas, my understanding is there would be the option for us to offer many different templates and different ways of organizing that left-hand screen menu and whatnot. Charles, did you want to add anything more to that? I don't know if that covers it or not.
No, I don't think I have too
Okay.
much to add to that. Certainly, we could probably, there's things that we can do with a new system that we haven't done before.
Yeah.
In doing things like, well, if a particular college wants to have a different template, we can do we should be able to do things like that. And that's something that as we go, once we've, and to be honest, that'll be true with either of the systems we're currently looking at. That's something that once we've decided on a platform, there's going to be a whole series of questions that will need to be addressed about kind of the overall process, the overall how our instance of the new platform will be set up and organized, that we'll have to work through.
Right.
And again, getting input from various folks to arrive at what we deem to be the best solution for ISU.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And we kind of, I don't want to say glossed over, but we didn't talk a lot about our plans for pilot testing in the fall. Part of that is because those plans are still being developed, of course. But that's going to be important. It's not just it's important to test to make sure that whichever product we select talks to all of the other systems on campus. I'm not sure how many students we have here, but in our surveying over the years, we found that the term ReggieNet, because it's not like a brand name, it's one that was developed on campus. That term has almost become like Xerox or Kleenex. It's used for everything that involves a website on campus, which is why, among other things, whatever the next LMS is going to be, it's not going to be called ReggieNet. But along those lines, that pilot testing is going to check all those integrations, but it's also going to inform what do we recommend, how do we build out these templates, what do these templates look like, and different things like that. So we only have about 5 minutes left, and I do need to take a little bit of time at the end to wrap up and direct you to different places. I'm kind of Scar asked, is there any way to have access to try Canvas ourselves? At this point, there is not. There is a sandbox that's been created for the advisory group at Illinois State, and we're going to be moving into the pilot testing phase. If you're interested in being part of the pilot testing phase, then my recommendation would be to go to our website, nextlms.illinoisstate.edu. And if you go to that website, you will see right here, there is this submit a question or comment, get involved. When you do that, it will capture your name. It'll prompt you to log in if you're not logged into the network anyway. And you can just type in a question or a comment. So if you have any questions about what our next steps are in this process, or if you want to volunteer to be part of the group that tests out whichever LMS we choose, this is the place to go. These are all kept in a spreadsheet so that we have a log of them. I try to respond, or I will send you to someone who has a better answer than I do usually. But this is a way to provide feedback to the advisory group that's going on. And oh my goodness, there's a heart. Let's go back. And enjoy your lunch. There is some other information on here as well, including whenever we do a news update, it'll be here. And this area here, where you probably click to join the webinar, will soon link to that resources page I will talk about. I got one more question I would like to answer, and then I'm afraid we're going to be running out of time. And I'm going to actually answer it from our new colleague, David. Does Canvas have a built-in plagiarism detector authenticity, try that again, authenticity verifier? If so, what service does it use, and do students get to opt in and out of sharing their data? GK or Carolyn, do you want to? And a simple yes or no would do at this point, I think.
Could you repeat it? I apologize.
No, that's okay. I know you guys are very busy.
Chin deep in the questions.
Yeah. Does Canvas have a built-in plagiarism detector authenticity verifier? Dave, we're going to talk about that word later. Does it have is there a built-in plagiarism system, or does it rely on integrating with a third party?
Yeah, that's a good question. It does rely on integrating with a third party. So systems like Turnitin, for example, are usually what people use in that regard. And the integration already exists. So if you have a Turnitin subscription and you have a Canvas subscription, it takes about 1 minute to fold those together.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming we have currently, anyway, we have Proctor Track, which is for identity management during test taking, for proctoring tests. I presume that there's an integration with Canvas for that as well.
Similar.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We are almost out of time. So what I'm going to suggest is, I see that we have a lot of questions and answers being asked and answered. I'm going to be doing my best to try to save a log of that, which may require a lot of copying and pasting on my part after everyone else is done with the meeting, but I'm happy to do that. And if we are not able to answer your question specifically, please rest assured that we will track that. If we know your identity, we will try to reach out to you once we have an answer. But more importantly, we're going to use this to guide our interactions, not only with our friends from Canvas, but also as we start testing things going forward. So let me really quickly, and we have about 15 or 20 seconds for each of us. For my colleagues on the panel, anything else you want to add? And if not, that's okay too. Just give me a thumbs up and we'll move on.
I have to say, these questions, I used to work at a Sakai school, UC Davis. They're now on Canvas. I have to say, these questions are a testament to the level of tech used by instructors on Sakai schools. Sakai IT teams are extremely savvy. That's why they use Sakai. But I only see questions like this from Sakai schools as well. You're all kind of blowing my mind with the different tools you've learned to integrate in your online teaching.
Just thank you. Thank you. Anyone else, or are we good, panel?
I'd just like to thank everybody for participating, and once again reassure folks that we will do our level best to make the transition as, I won't say painless, but because it won't be, but the least amount of pain as possible for instructors. I was certainly here for the last time we did this, and I know it was a major pain. Hopefully it will not be so bad this time around. And we, like I said, we will do our best, and everybody is cognizant of our need to do so. So,
well, we are officially out of time, so I'm going to have to go ahead and end the call now. I will say that just really quickly chiming in on what you said, Charles, that also holds true for our students on campus. And we also don't want faculty to find themselves in the position of being tech support for students. So the Technology Support Center, which is where we always send students, they are very heavily involved and will be in whichever LMS we do. GK, you had your mic unmuted. You got 10 seconds.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, Canvas is not like moving to Sakai from Blackboard or something like that. It is, the road is paved. We're going to help a lot. And that's my job, to make it as simple as possible.
Thank you very much. I agree that the chasm between WebCT and Sakai is a Grand Canyon compared to the valley we need to straddle this time between all of this. Keep in mind, same time, Thursday, go to nextlms.illinoisstate.edu to get the link. Join us for another hour. We will have invite some friends from the other system that we're looking at, Brightspace D2L. They will be here to ask questions, answer questions as well. So again, everyone, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it. Happy teaching. We'll see you around.